Okay, yesterday we learned that Moses went into Pharaoh and he threatened him with plagues. And that's what happened. They started the plagues. First of all, there was blood, and all the water turned into blood. And it lasted for 1 week. The plague lasted for 1 week. After 7 days that the Egyptians didn't have any water. According to some opinions, they did have water when they dug around the river. There was water under the ground. They could, I guess, put straws in there or whatever and drink it. Some people say that the Jews, they did have water, so they sold water to the Egyptians. How it is they did get very limited amounts of water for 7 days, and that's sort of indicated by the fact that said that the Egyptian magicians, they also were able to turn water into blood. And of course, the question is asked, where did they get water from? All the water in Egypt was turned into blood. So it must have been somehow or other they did have some sort of other access to blood. But interestingly enough, even though that they were able to turn water into blood, they were not able to turn blood into water. They could make the curses, and we'll see they could only make a couple of them. They could make the curses, but they couldn't fix it back up. Okay, so 7 days finished of the blood, and Rashi says this shows that all of the plagues were the same way: 7 days of plague and 3 days of warning. I'm sorry, 7 days of plague and 1 week, in other words, of plague, and 3 weeks, 21 days of warning. It says that every plague was 1/4 of the month, 1 week, and there were 3 weeks that were warnings. It says, okay, but it seems that the plague of darkness was only 6 days. We're going to learn about that. We'll learn later on, and etc. And there was also, sometime there was the plagues, they only started also after Moses he warned them in the beginning. So there was also a few months before they started, because there were only 10 plagues, and all the plagues altogether took 1 year, it says. Okay. So God said to Moses, come into Pharaoh. We did this yesterday. Go into Pharaoh and tell her, this is what God says. Send my people go, let my people go so they can serve me. Very basic message of going out of Egypt. The Jewish people were free from Egypt and they were free to serve God. And 2 types of freedom from and freedom to. So they were freed, let my people go so they'll be free from Egypt. I'll be free to serve me. And if you refuse, this is what God is telling Moses to say to Pharaoh. Of course, Moses didn't say anything to Pharaoh. Moses spoke to Aaron, and Aaron was the one who gave this over. But they went in together. If you refuse to send my people, I am going to smite your whole with all of your boundaries with frogs, Sephardim, with frogs. Frogs will be the river, the Nile River will be creeping with frogs. They'll come out into your house, into your place where your bedroom, on your bed, in the place where you work. Then after that, it'll go to your people and in their ovens and in their bread. Here we go. Marsh says, into your house. The plague began with Pharaoh first, because he was the one who incited all of his people against the Jews. That's what Rashi says. So therefore, it began with him. It'll come in you. What does it mean? It'll come in you. Rashi says inside of your stomach. they will come inside of your stomach and they will croak. Ubechal avadecha, and all of your servants will be Sfaradim. They'll be Sfaradim. This is the warning. And God said to Moses, tell Aaron that he should stretch his hand on the rivers. Now again, why did Aaron? Because Moses did not want to make a plague, curse the river. 1 second. Because the river saved Moses earlier. On the rivers, on all the bodies of water in Egypt, there will be frogs on the whole entire land. Aaron stuck his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the Tzfardea came up, and the frog came up. What? Not the frog, the frogs, right? No, it says frog. Only one frog came up. Well, that's not so big. It must have been a pretty big frog, because it says that Techas is Eretz Mitzrayim, and one frog covered the whole land of Egypt. We didn't learn about that in school, did we? Rashi says no. One Sfardea came out, and the Egyptians would hit it, and it mitazen. It would divide up nachalim to be like rivers and rivers of frogs. That's what the Midrash says. The simple meaning is that Sfardim, a lot of Sfardim is called one, like sheep, right? Like you say sheep. There's one sheep is a sheep, and a lot of sheep are called sheep. So according to grammar, it also works out. And that's what it means, that it covered means that the plague of frog plague covered it over. Okay, that's one way of saying it. However it was, there were millions, billions, trillions of frogs everywhere. This is just a warning, right? Okay, here it goes. And so all of a sudden, there was the warning, and now it actually happened. Okay, so Pharaoh said, he called his sorcerers, and he said, can you get rid of the frogs? He said, no, but we can make frogs too. Don't be impressed by Moses. And these people, they just did it first. Watch this. And they also did the same thing. And the frogs came up on the land of Egypt as well. It says, Yalu et Tzfardim. It says that the Sfardim went up. The Sforno, he continues just with the same message that he had before, that they really couldn't create really living things. The Egyptian sorcerers. Lo yochlu laholid achirim. They couldn't really give birth to new ones. It says that the Sfardim, they just went up because they haven't got the power, lahamtzi bria, to really create a living thing that moves truly. They just created, like, I don't know, cartoon figures or whatever it is, that they could do the same thing. In any case, it was enough to calm Pharaoh down that he wasn't excited about Moses. And Pharaoh called to Moses and Aaron, and he said, Hatiru al Hashem, do me a favor, ask God, v'yasarat et tzvardim, get rid of these frogs from me and from my people, and you know what? I'll let you go. I got the point. I'll let you go, and you can make sacrifices to your God. Now Pharaoh was already calling the name of God. Before, he was saying there is no such thing. I don't know of such thing. Oh, Shalom Herschel. Here's an interesting Or HaChaim. He says like this. The plague of the Tzfardim was two things. First of all, they made a tremendous noise. And the second, they were coming into everybody's stomach and everywhere. That's number one thing. And so that's what he said. Get rid of the Sfardim from me and from my people. Take them out of my stomach. Then after that, there was the next one we're going to see is the plague of fleas. The plague of fleas because even though that everyone was uncomfortable, but there wasn't any danger of death like the frogs were. The frogs, it says that they stuffed up everybody's intestines. And so a person couldn't go to the bathroom. It was a terrible thing, and it was dangerous. Therefore, even though that he knew that it was the finger of God, it was the hand of God that did it, and they also were not to do it, but nevertheless, Pharaoh's heart got stronger and stronger. Just one second. Right. That's what he says. The Or HaChaim asked the question, why is it that over here he pleaded to Moses, please ask for God to stop this? Why was it? He said, because here it was dangerous to him. His life was in danger. He said, not like all the others. The others, the fleas that were very uncomfortable. He said, even the wild animals that came, he was very, very afraid. And that's what he said. There, where there was a danger to himself, we see that Pharaoh said also, pray for me. Okay, well, let's go further and we'll see. Moses said to Pharaoh, okay, hit pa'er alai. What does it mean, hit pa'er alai? It's saying, because of, test me. Lamatai atir lecha. When should I remove these frogs from your servant and from everybody, to get rid of the frogs? Mimchan, also from you and from your house. Rak b'yar tishano. They'll just remain in the river. Vayomer lamachar. He said, please, do it tomorrow. He figured maybe Moses would say, he would probably say today, So Moses knew it was going to happen. So he said, you know what? Leave it one more day. I want to test you and see if you can if it's really coming from you or not. If you have the power, maybe it's just natural processes over here, and you happen to know what's going to happen. So it's just a natural thing, and you happen to like the weather reporter says it's going to rain tomorrow, and then the weather reporter says I'm going to cause it to rain tomorrow, and he's really just saying what's going to be. So Pharaoh said, probably Moses is going to. The thing is, probably Moses knows it's going to happen. Stop today, and so he says, I can stop it today if you want. And Pharaoh said, you know what? Stop it tomorrow. And he said, okay. In order that she'ein kashem Elokeinu, that it's not my power, everything comes from tomorrow. It means, what does he say? Pray today that the frog should stop tomorrow. V'sfaro Sfardim, and all of I'm going to pray today, and the Sfardim, the frogs, will go away from you, from your house, from your servants, from your people. Only in the river will they remain. Moshe went out and Aaron from Pharaoh. Moshe cried out to God about the Sfardim, about the frogs. Asher Salma Pharaoh, that he smote Pharaoh with. It says Moshe went out and he cried immediately that tomorrow they should go away. Or HaChaim says, from here we learn that when you pray, you have to be specific in your prayer. So get rid of the frogs that he gave, the plague that he gave to Pharaoh. Because he said, you could say get rid of the frogs and there would never be any more frogs in Egypt. So he prayed that we'll give only these particular frogs. God did like Hashem kedavar Moshe. God did what Moses said. Vayamusu Sfardim, and the frogs died. Mina batim, from the houses, from the yards, umina sadeh, and from the fields. Says the Dat Zkenim, but those frogs that went into the ovens, lo metu, they didn't die. Why? Because they trusted in God. V'nichnasu b'tanor, and they went into hot ovens. B'tzivu Hashem, with the commandment of God. And it says that in the There's a midrash that says that later on in the time of Daniel, this is like after the destruction of the temple, when the Jews were in Babylon. So the king, Nebuchadnezzar, he threw Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, three really holy Jews that were friends with Daniel, the prophet Daniel. He took the three of them and he threw them into a fiery furnace. He gave them the choice either to bow down to him or to go into a fiery furnace. And they said, listen, if the frogs were willing to do what God said and go into the furnaces, and this is totally the opposite of the nature of the frogs, and they jumped into the furnaces from their own free will because God told them to. So we, for sure, that it's our nature to serve God, we should do it also. So those frogs that jumped into the ovens, they didn't die. That's what the Dat Zkanim says, that God let them live because they followed what God wanted. The Egyptians gathered them up, piles and piles, Vativa Ash Oretz, and the whole land became fetid. It was all rotten and terrible smelling. Vayar Pharaoh, and Pharaoh saw that he had a respite. There was no plague, and he promised to let the Jews go. V'hachbeidet libo, and his heart got hardened his heart. He got all of a sudden stubborn again. V'lo shema Elohim, and he didn't listen to them, just like God said. Rashi, v'hachbeidet libo, says lashon poelhu. What does it mean? That it got hard. He brings all sorts of examples. He hardened his heart. Kasher diber Hashem, like God said. When did God say? V'lo yishma lechem Paro. God previously said to Moses that you're going to do all these plagues and you do your best, but I'm letting you know right now that Paro is not going to listen to you. He's not going to listen to you because I want to destroy him totally. I don't want him to let you go and then go back to his old evil ways. Just one moment. Here the Kli Ykar says that it doesn't say anywhere else that Pharaoh saw that the plague stopped and then he hardened his heart. It doesn't say that by any of the other plagues, even though all the other plagues did stop. Why all of a sudden here does it say that he saw that it stopped and therefore his heart hardened? So he says, it doesn't say this in any of the other plagues, except for the one of the frogs, because all the other plagues, when they went away totally. There was not left anything at all by the fleas, by the hail. After the 7 days of the plague, there were no more fleas and there was no more hail. So therefore, it wasn't such a new thing. Therefore, he would say, okay, I see that there's nothing left of the plague, so he hardened his heart. But here, there were frogs that remained. First of all, it says clearly that there were the frogs that they gathered up, and they made piles and piles of frogs. They didn't go away. Also, we just learned that it said that the frogs that were in the ovens, they didn't go away. So, but in any case, it says clearly in the Torah that he could still smell the smell of these millions of billions of frogs that had covered the whole land of Egypt. So therefore, it says that Pharaoh saw that there was a little bit of a respite, and nevertheless, his heart got hard. What does it mean? Because this terrible smell is also a dangerous thing. But therefore, when Pharaoh saw that the smell of the land of Israel, of the smell of the frogs in Egypt, that they were outside and it wasn't so dangerous. So then he thought, okay, you know what? The smell is not going to hurt me so much. Therefore, his heart got harder, just like in the beginning. In other words, he could still see the frogs, he could still smell them, but because there was no immediate danger to him, so he became stubborn again. And he said, I'm not letting the Jews go. God said to Moses, say to Aaron, stick out your hand and smite the dirt of the earth, and it's going to become fleas. Fleas in all of the land of Egypt. One second. Oh, okay. There's going to be fleas in all of the land of Egypt. Moses, why does God say, speak to Aaron that he should smite it? He said, it wasn't right that Moses should smite Loya Afar Kadai Lilakos Ayade Moshe. It was not right that Moses should smite the ground. Why not? Why not the ground? I mean, we understood that God did not want Moses to hit the river and put a curse on the river on the first two plagues, blood and frogs, because the river protected Moses. But what's with the ground? How was the ground? It's because the ground also protected Moses. He said that when he killed the Egyptian, remember there was an Egyptian that was trying to kill a Jew, the husband of Shlomit Bat Dibri, remember? And Moses killed him and he hid him in the ground. No one would have known about it if it wasn't for Nadav and Avihu. Valaka al Yadei Aaron. So therefore God said, okay, the ground tried to hide this Egyptian. Nadav and Avihu, they were the ones that told Pharaoh, but if it wasn't for them, then the ground would have succeeded in protecting Moshe. So he said, okay, Aaron, you smite the ground. Okay, interestingly enough, that we said, what did we say? That there were 1 week, every plague was 1 week long. And then there was 3 weeks that Moses would go in and out of Pharaoh and saying, listen, you want to let the Jews go or you want to have a plague? So that was with the blood and also with the frogs. But interesting enough here, with the fleas, the kinim, doesn't mention that there was a warning, even though of course there was. God just says all of a sudden, he says, Pharaoh saw that there was no more danger from the frogs, and so he became brave again. Then all of a sudden, God says to Moses, and moral Aaron, speak to Aaron, stick your hand out. It doesn't give him any warning. Why? So the Sforno, Rav Avadia from Sforno, he says that here, it seems that Moses did not warn Pharaoh in this plague, and also not in the Shechin and the boils, and also not in the plague of darkness. So 3 of the 7 plagues, there was no warning. Why? The 9 plagues that were for signs and for proofs, the 9 were Datsach, Dam, Tzfardea, Kinim, Adash, Eruv. We talked about this before, right? Bach, only alone. Only these 9 were for a warning. The last plague, which is the plague of the firstborn, it wasn't a sign and it wasn't a proof of God. It was just a punishment. We said that before. We talked about that before. That's what the Sforno says. So the first 3 plagues, Dam, Tzfardea, Kinim, these were signs in the 2 of the basic foundations, earth and water. Water and earth. The first 2, blood and frogs, came from the water, and the kinim came from the earth. Adash, that came from not from water and earth, but it came from animals. Arov was wild animals. Dever was a plague of the animals, and Shechin hit the earth, hit the people. There was Shechin and everyone. And Ba'ach and Borad, the hail and the locusts, right? And the darkness, this came from the air, from the air. Sorry. In each one of them, there was a warning. But in the third, it was a sign without any warning. So in each one of these, here we have the tzach, the first two, there was a warning, blood. But the third one, kinim, there was no warning. There was no warning. Also here, the same thing. The first two, there was a warning. But the shechin, the boils, there was no warning. There was no warning. Also here, the first two, with hail and locusts, there was a warning, but in darkness, there was no warning. That's what he says. There was no warning. Ka'omer, like it says, Hein kol ela yif all kale. Pa'amayim shlosh im gavar. In other words, the first two were enough to have a warning before them. So the third one, according to what he said, that 3 weeks passed by and there was no warning. Seems that this does not agree with what Rashi said. Rashi says that there was a warning for each and every one of them. But okay, that's what he says. In fact, though, is that in the Torah, it's not mentioned a warning by the fleas. Okay, Aaron did it. He lifted up his hand with his stick. He hit the dirt, and suddenly it became fleas on men, on animals. All of the dirt of Egypt suddenly became fleas, the whole land of Egypt. It says, Patikim Harchisha, that all started moving around. Like these fleas all started moving around. It must have been pretty terrible. Just one moment. Okay. So they made the fleas. Good. So okay, we had the first 2 plagues that the Egyptian sorcerers were able to duplicate, but this one they couldn't. Vayasu kena chartumim, and the Egyptian magicians tried to do that with their sorcery. Lotzia takinim, to make fleas, v'lo yachlu, they weren't able to. Vayakinam ba'adam b'behema, and on man and animal. Fleas were everywhere. They weren't able to create them. Or even to bring them out from another place. And they weren't able to. She'ain a shade, because the Egyptian sorcerers, they worked through demons and other spiritual powers. And it said the demons and other spiritual evil powers cannot create or cannot duplicate anything which is less than the size of like a barley grain of barley. The Sforno, who previously said that the Egyptian sorcerers, they couldn't create anything anyway. All they could do is just make things appear. He said they couldn't move anything that really moved. So in other words, they could create things that looked real. For instance, blood, you could see the color blood, so they could duplicate that color. And the frogs, so they could duplicate things that looked like frogs, right? They weren't really alive. But the whole thing of the fleas is that they were moving, and that they couldn't create. Fleas that don't move, they're so small you can't see it's a flea. It just looks like little specks of dirt. But all the earth was all moving, and they couldn't make anything move. That's what the Sforno says. Here, the Das Zakenim says a very interesting thing. it's a known thing that witchcraft, witches and sorcerers, they only have power if their feet are on the ground. There's a story, a long story in the Talmud with Shimon ben Shetach, that there were, 60, I think, witches. You have to look over there in the Gemara. I think it's in Avodah Zorah, the Gemara, that there were 60 witches that were doing all sorts of witchcraft and bothering people. And so Shimon ben Shetach said he was going to put an end to them. And how did he do it? He said, well, witches can't have any power. Women, they're all women, witches, unless their feet are on the ground. So he took 60 young men, and he told all of them, waited for a rainy day, and he took these 60 men, and he said, took them to the cave, outside of the cave where these witches were, and he said, stand out here. When I give the signal, as you take dry clothes, they all brought dry clothes in pitchers or in bags or whatever, put on the dry clothes and come in and dance with these ladies. Dance with them, lift them all up and carry them to the court, and they'll all be hung, because a witch cannot have any power when her feet aren't touching the ground. And that's what they did. He went in and he said, I've come to learn from you witchcraft and to teach you witchcraft. They said, okay, you go first. So he said, okay, watch this. I can bring 60 young men in from the pouring rain with dry clothes, and they'll dance with you. They said, okay, that's what we'd like. So that's what he clapped his hands. They put on the dry clothes. They came in, lifted them all up, took them to court, and they were all hung because they didn't have any witchcraft. So it says the same thing was here. Dasakanim. All the ground turned into fleas. The Midrash said because the Kenim, they separated between the feet of the Egyptian sorcerers and the ground. And witchcraft doesn't work unless the person who is the witch or the sorcerer, or whatever it is, unless his feet touch the ground. Like the story about Shimon ben Shetach, it says that the young men lifted up these witches from the ground. And that's what he said, these first three plagues, they came by means of Aaron, Datzach, Dom, Tzfardea, and Kenim, and they came from the earth. Like we said, one came from the river, and the other two came from the earth. These three, the last three, which are Barad, the hail and the locusts and darkness, they were done by Moses, and they came from the heaven, because Moses was ruling on the heavens. Okay, and the other middle three came by means of God, the Shechin, etc. There were different ways of interpreting exactly how these came. Okay, but that was an interesting thing. So the witches said to Pharaoh, this is the hand of God, this is the finger of God. But nevertheless, Pharaoh got stubborn, and he didn't hear them, just exactly like what God said before. Why did they say this is the finger of God? They said, Moses did this. This is not by means of witchcraft. This comes from God. Witches can't rule on anything which is so small. And this is what God said. What did God say? Like we said in the beginning, God said that Pharaoh is not going to listen to you. Let's do one more. Vayomer Hashem. Now remember, that one didn't have a warning, we said. This one does. Pharaoh, that God said to Moses. So remember that the last of each of the three sets did not have a warning. Tatzach, the Chapt, the Kenim, doesn't have a warning. Adash, the Shechin, the boils, don't have a warning. And the darkness doesn't have a warning. So let's see. Okay, here we go. Then this is the second set of three. God said to Moses, wake up in the morning, stand in front of Pharaoh. He's coming out from the water. He still still trying to fake it that he's God, that he doesn't have to go to the bathroom. He goes into the river, to try to hide from the people, and maybe even from himself that he's not going to the bathroom. I don't know. And say, this is what God said. So let my people go so they should serve me. And because if you don't send my people, behold, I'm going to send in you and in your servants and in your people and in your household the Aroiv. What's the Aroiv? Aroiv, Rashi says, is all sorts of chayos ros, all sorts of destructive animals and snakes and scorpions, ba'arvuvia, all mixed in. And they would destroy and bite and sting and whatever, all of them. And there's a reason why. It says in the Agada that every single plague explains why it came and exactly what it was for. And he says like this. Here we see that God was making a war against Pharaoh, which understandably so, because Pharaoh, he really started the war. In the techniques of war, the kings, it says, Milchamas Malachim is Bo'alayim. That God came with war strategy. How do war strategy do? At least that's what it used to be. When they would make surround a city, first of all, they wreck up the water supply. That's what God did. Number one, he smote the water. After that, they start sounding horns, and they make, in order that everybody should be afraid and scared. And then that's what the frogs did. They were making all sorts of noise. Like it says in Rabbi Tanchuma, etc. That was it goes into all the details about the war, about the plagues. Okay, here we have the fourth plague, wild animals. They'll fill your house. Here it says, if you don't send out my people, behold, I'm sending you and your people the Orev, the mixed animals, and they'll fill the houses of Egypt, the Orev, with these assortment of wild animals, and also the ground that you're on it. What does that mean, the ground that you're on it? The ground that you're standing, the houses on, will be filled with snakes and scorpions and all sorts of weird spiders and things like that. And that live already underneath the ground, in a way that you'll never be sure, even in the nighttime, even when your house is closed, because these things will come creeping up from under your basement, from the foundations of your house. They'll come up and bite you. They flisi b'yomahu at Eretz Goshen, but today I'm going to separate the land of Goshen, where the Jews were living, and that my nation, my people, God is saying that my people are living in it. They're standing on it. That there, the wild animals are not going to go. There won't be the wild animals, in order that you know that I am God in the earth. Rashi says, Hiflesi, I'm going to separate. That's what Hifla. All the time it says Hifla means that God's saying that I'm going to, Hifla means to make miracles, but here it doesn't. He says the word Hifla means that I'm going to elevate. I'm going to elevate my people. The animals I'm going to separate from the Jews, but they won't be separated from you, in order that you'll know that I am ruling over the world. Says Rashi, even though Sheshachanti b'shamayim, even though that my place where I dwell is in the heavens, you don't really see me much here, but my laws will be affected also. They'll affect the physical world also. Basamti padus, but I'm going to make a separation between my people and your people. Tomorrow will be this amazing sign. He says, I'll make a separation not only in the land, but there were still a lot of Jews that were living among the Egyptians. The Jews were slaves. They had houses in the Egyptians. They were slaves in the houses of the Egyptians. So he said, Or HaChaim says, in addition to the fact that the wild animals are not going to go into the land of Goshen, he says that's where mainly the Levites lived. Also, I'm going to make another separation for the Jewish people that live outside of Goshen, that the wild animals won't harm them. That's what he said, between my people and your people, not just between the land, your land. Even when my people and you people will be equal, living in the same place, nevertheless, the animals will not bite the Jews. God did so, and he brought the wild animals. And he brought a very heavy onslaught of wild animals into the house of Pharaoh and his servants, the whole land of Egypt, and it destroyed the land because of these wild animals, the wild animals. And Pharaoh called to Moshe and Aaron, and he said, "Go, get out of here, make the sacrifices to your God, to the God in Israel, in Egypt, where you are. Right? You don't have to go into the desert. Stay where you are, make your sacrifices, I'll leave you alone." Moshe said, "No, we can't do that. The land of Egypt is a disgusting place. We can't sacrifice to God over here. We can't sacrifice the God of Israel, of Egypt, in your eyes." The Egyptians worshipped the sheep. It says Toevas Mitzrayim. Here it says, no, I'm sorry. So I mistranslated this. It said, we can't do this. We can't. Toavas Mitzrayim means the God of God, means also Toavas means this disgusting thing, but it means the God of Egypt. When Egypt sacrifices it, it's disgusting because they do it for idolatry. Egyptians worship sheep. That's what he says. We can't sacrifice the God of Egypt. Anyway, by the Jewish people, it's called a toiva when the Egyptians sacrifice it. And also we can say another that's toivas mitzrayim. What does it mean? A devil which is disgusting to the Egyptians. The Jews are going to sacrifice their God. They won't let us do that. The Egyptians will be disgusted by the fact that we're going to Shari Yerusam, we're sacrificing their animals. The Egyptians will stone us. They'll stone us. God didn't say we're going to be protected from that. We're not making any trouble. We're only going to do what God wants. We want to leave. In 3 days, we're going to go into the desert. We'll sacrifice to God, just like God said. Pharaoh said, "I'll send you and your animals to Hashem in the desert. But don't go far away. Don't go far away and pray to God. Right? I'll let you go a little bit. You can go a little bit." Moshe said, "I'm going to go from your people. I'm going to go. Hitarti el Hashem, and I'll pray to God, and the wild animals will stop from Pharaoh and your people and your servants and your people tomorrow. Only Al Yosef Pharaoh, do me a favor. Don't continue to play with us anymore. Labilti shalach, and not let the people go. Come on, Hatel. Don't fool us anymore. Make the plagues. You say you're going to send us, and you don't do it. Okay, Pharaoh, what do you say?" Yotze Moshe came out of Pharaoh, and he prayed to God, and God did what Moshe said, and he took away the wild animals from Pharaoh and his servants and his people, and there wasn't even one of them. But Yachped Pharaoh its libo, and Pharaoh hardened his heart again, also this time, and he did not send the people. Awful P, even though, Rashi says, even though that he swore, and he said, "I'm going to send you out," he didn't keep his promise. Just like he says, Gam, also this time, just like he did with the frogs. Even though the Haya Yo Yira, that he was afraid from the frogs scared him, that he was going to die, and also the wild animals scared him because he was going to die. But nevertheless, he said, I'm not going to listen to you. And therefore, he said, I'm not going to listen to what God says. I'm not afraid. But maybe this is all that God has. This is all the tricks that he's got. I'm not going to let you go. He's just a bluff. As we're going to see tomorrow that it was not. And God willing, we'll learn about the rest of the plagues tomorrow. The rest of the plagues that are in this Torah portion. This Torah portion, there's only 7 of the plagues. And next week, we're going to learn about the last 3. But tomorrow we're going to learn about also the last plagues of the 7 that God sent on the Egyptians, and what was the purpose of all of them. Have a good day with Mashiach now. Hope to see you all at tomorrow, 8:15 sharp.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure, my pleasure. There we go. Oh, no.